insofar as this group of people are claiming to care about whether or not this actually is brought to fruition, noticing that since the inauguration of Black Lives Matter into the public consciousness, that race issues have progressively gotten worse as what most people would consider to be a consequence of this sort of division. Maybe it was good-natured in intention at first, but the way that it has created factions of resistance that would not have existed had it been offered in a more inclusive way to the public. The argument that I would make is, sure, have your fun, do what you're going to do, give the spotlight to your community. But if you're actually trying to fix the problems that you're trying to bring up, you would have a lot more allies in this endeavor should you had included everyone. And instead of being manipulated by statistics that are being used in biased ways, you said, we need to have a conversation in America about why the police are killing everyone. Why are they killing 3,000 people a year on some years? And why are they responsible for more deaths, whether justified or not, than almost, I think the statistic is all of organized crime in the country, right? So that's the conversation that would have unified our country, because it's the conversation that we need to be having. We have a police system that is brutalizing our citizens. And it's not a game of who's the biggest victim. But if it were, white people are absorbing, insofar as gross outcomes, the brunt of this brutality. Every year, there are way more white people killed than Black people. And it might be a statistical sort of...
Wait, did you say white people are more than Black people?
Yeah, they kill more white people every
but
year.
But not, just to be clear, not if you adjusted per... But
yeah, that's a manipulation. Yeah. That's a manipulation. And insofar as you're sympathetic to this attempt to say, well, the rate is what's important. Just look at how that would play out in any other loss of life situation. Say that I decided that from now on, I'm going to say that the Khmer Rouge was about, it was a genocide of men. It had nothing to do with people being Chinese nationals and the extirpation of those people, because the rates of men dying were higher than everything else. So this wasn't a issue that was about Chinese nationals being sort of exterminated by the government. This was an issue of men, right? Because that's what the rates would reflect. And you could jigger these sort of situations any way you want with the Holocaust, with any large loss of life. Would it be fair to try to say that the Holocaust was more about, I don't know, killing Polish people, because it just so happens that Polish people were much more largely represented at the rates of fatality in the Holocaust than anyone else? No. It's obviously something that is an issue for all people of Jewish descent. And to try to step inside of that loss of life tragedy and manipulate for ideological and identity reasons why somehow some segment of this oppressed and brutalized population is actually the victim in a way that other people aren't, that would not fly anywhere else. But for some reason, people are scared to tell this to Black people. They're like, oh, yes, the rates are higher. That's not even really true, first. Second of all, even if it was true, it would not be the most prudent way to approach this situation. I'm saying even if it is true, insofar as outcomes are what are important, focusing on that as the central narrative for how we're going to go about getting police reform in America is unproductive. It is obviously so. And so I can bounce back and forth between these two modes of reasoning where I'm pushing back against this idea, where, first of all, I'm concerned about and aware of the outcomes that it's having. And second of all, I just don't think that it's based in reality. Let me just do it this way. So you take and you create this divisive faction that wants to focus specifically on their grievances. And they want the rest of the world to be sort of beholden to their hijacking of a conversation that affects many more people. And you say, well, how is this going to turn out? Then you imagine the counterfactual reality where this doesn't play out, where it starts off and instead of people wanting to get a spotlight on their own grievance, everyone came together and they said, let's all unify around this as a nation. Which one of these scenarios would you forecast to end up having the greatest impact towards the actual goals that are meant to achieve? So if you actually care about what's happening to Black people at the hands of the police and you want those situations fixed, it would have been more prudent to just fix the entire scenario. When you try to focus on this one group, you create division, you create factions of resistance, you create people who want to define themselves in opposition to that. Whereas had you started off from this more inclusive position, you would not be finding those things to be the case. I think that's just something that you have to admit as a fact. Right. And insofar as an Every Lives movement became the banner that we started marching under, you would see that this would dissolve pretty quickly. It would give no identity cause to marshal a resistance against this slogan and this cause, right? I think that that's just obvious. So the fact that Black people in certain numbers think that the way to get justice for themselves is to turn this into something that's just about them, they're chopping off their own nose in spite of their face. Because if you just said, let's fix this for everybody, guess who else that would fix it for? All Black people. The one thing that won't happen, I'm sorry, is that if we fix it for all Black people, it'll fix it for everyone else. Are you seeing this dynamic in the way that it's actually playing out? Because I think everyone needs to sort of wrestle with the reality that there is a truth of consequences and outcomes in this scenario where, say we were just resoundingly successful, bringing to fruition all of the goals of the Black Lives Matter movement. What would that do for anyone else? Not much. But if we did with this other more inclusive movement, if we had a resounding success having some sort of police reform where instead of saying defund the police, which is just, don't get me started, we said something like, let's use DARPA and let's use the weapons and materials research branch of the Army to see about creating a 5-year national plan where we engage in a project to completely de-lethalize all police ordnance, right? Let's have a conversation about the future based on technology, based on something that could definitely fix this issue of loss of life in the police world for everyone, right? So if we were having a conversation that was actually going to be based in reason, where we wanted to fix this problem, there's precedents that's set in other countries where taking lethal ordinance out of the scenario is a very good fix for lowering the fatalities caused by police intervention. And if we combine that with all the technological fruits of our great society in the form of the Defense and Advanced Research Project from DARPA and the Army wing of the WMRD, we could be having a conversation about how do we co-opt these institutions to start producing ordinances for police that give us a police system that moves into the future with us, where we're not being killed anymore by the people who are supposed to be protecting us. There are real conversations that could be being had that aren't these infantile sort of defund the police. And now we're going to pretend like that's not what we mean because smarter people got a hold of the idea and they're using us for useful fucking idiots because they know what we mean. These young people really want to abolish the police, but then you got this Moat Daily tactic where the people at the top are like, well, we can't let that fly. Let's let them keep saying that, but we're going to raise this up to a more intellectual thing. And we're going to say, no, we're just talking about refunding other areas and not really abolishing the police. And that is just bullshit, right? They know what their constituents are actually calling for. And they know that they're allowing these people to exist with this desire and goal, but they think that they can just hijack it and turn it into something a little bit more polished. And now it's not a problem. Well, no, fuck that. I think that there's a real conversation. I've been a victim of so much police brutality. The stories that I've told on these podcasts don't even scratch the surface. So I am extremely invested. I know people who have been killed by the police. I have friends and family who have had horrible things done to them at the hands of this system. And if we're right now having the first opportunity where the whole nation is paying attention to this, and there was the potential for a conversation to be being had where we could actually bring an end to this, and it is being disrupted and undermined by people's petty little grievances, fuck those people. And I really wish that there was something that we could do to undermine them. There are real conversations we could be having as a nation, and we're not having them because we are caught up in this nonsense.
Wow.